This weekend on the full Grand Prix circuit, and this being their third event of the season, we're now starting to get a real picture of who the early championship favourites are in both the Pro and the AM category. It'll be interesting to see how that story develops though over the weekend, because we've got Jack Bartholomew on pole position here today, won for the first time last time at Brands Hatch. But he's 20 points off the championship lead, so another win could put him right back in the picture. As you just saw, it's cold, it's grey, there's a threat of rain, but the track is dry at the moment, and we're getting set for what should be a cracking 25 minutes of racing here on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. The field are just making their way around from the assembly area, which is about two-thirds of the way down the Wellington Straight at the end of the lap. They tour through Brooklands, Luffield and Woodcote, pull up in their grid positions and then head off on a green flag lap before the 25 minutes of racing get underway. As I said, it's the third event of the season, so this round 5 of the championship. In the Pro category, 3 of the 4 races so far have been won by Theo Edgerton, but Theo Edgerton starts only second on the grid for this one. It is that man there, Jack Bartholomew, who has the pole position in the number 89 Redline racing car, whilst Theo Edgerton for Total Control Racing starts alongside. Bartholomew didn't score points in the first race at Brands Hatch. He'd had a podium previously at Thruxton, but Jack bounced back quite nicely in race 2 on the Grand Prix circuit last time to take a race victory. And as I said, he's third in the championship now, 20 points behind Theo Edgerton. The man that separates them in the championship is Ethan HAWKEY, who starts third on the grid today. He is on 29 points though, so he's only got 6 points in hand over Bartholomew. So if Bartholomew beats him again today, there is a chance we could have at least a change for second place in the championship. In the AM category, it's been dominant, quite frankly, the performance from Ian Humphries for Veluga. Ian Humphries has won all 4 of the 4 races that we've had so far this season, with Nigel Rice on the podium in 3 of those races, but had a non-finish in the final race at Brands Hatch last time out. So Nigel Rice is only a single point now ahead of Pete Chambers for second in the AM category, whilst in the Teams Championship, Team Parker Racing enjoy a pretty healthy lead over Redline Racing. 115 points for Team Parker, 83 for Redline. So the cars are out on their green flag lap then. They'll line up on the grid, as I said, at the end of this for 25 minutes of racing around the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. Lap times for these Porsche Caymans in and around the 2:10s to 11s probably for race pace. It was a 2 minutes 10.0 though that put Jack Bartholomew on pole position ahead of Theo Edgerton, with Ethan HAWKEY and Charles Clark on the second row of the grid. Then it's Matthew Armstrong and Ambrogio Perfetti who leads the AM contingent there. You can see he's got the AM pole ahead of Ian Humphries, the AM championship leader and winner of all 4 races so far, and Alexei Malikin is alongside him. Nigel Rice and Carl Cavers are on the 5th row of the grid, and then on row 6 Charles March and Pete Chambers, and that will round out your grid here for the first race of the weekend. So yeah, interesting that, isn't it? Then the 2 drivers that have kind of had it almost all their own way in both Pro and AM, Edgerton and Humphries respectively, neither of them have got their class pole positions for this race. Ambrogio Perfetti, who's on the AM class pole in car number 51, has had a bit of a season to forget really. A DNF followed by a 3rd place in class at Thruxton. Then he scored very low indeed. He was only about 7th and 8th, I think, in class in the 2 races at Brands Hatch. So Perfetti clearly getting on well with the Silverstone circuit. There is Ambrogio, the Chupa Chups number 51 car, that being the family business, of course, for the Perfettis. A number of Perfettis over the last decade or so made appearances in British motorsport. Ambrogio is looking to try and get his AM class championship back on track. You score 10 points for a class win. There's a bonus point then for pole position and a bonus point for a fastest lap as well. So 12 points in theory on offer in this race. Perfetti's got himself the bonus point for pole already, so has Jack Bartholomew in the Pro class. But they need the big points really from the races this weekend to try, for both of those drivers, to get themselves properly into the championship fight. There goes Ian Humphries, you just saw him go through, the AM class leader. And we've got a decent number of AM drivers actually racing in the championship. More than half the grid, in fact, are AM drivers. 8 of them in total. We haven't got Kurt Liner with us this weekend. Kurt was a podium finisher at Thruxton and then had a pair of top 6 finishes at Brands Hatch. Spectators watching on then here at Silverstone. They're huddled together in the couple of grandstands that are open around the Grand Prix circuit. There's also a decent amount of roving viewing available, so the spectators can easily socially distance at racetracks, as we all know to be the case. And we very, very much hope that we can start welcoming more and more fans back in the near future. Of course, it was announced this week, wasn't it, that the British Grand Prix here at Silverstone will be one of these trial events that will allow a capacity crowd. So that's going to be a great race, the first time that a Formula 1 race will have that proper Grand Prix atmosphere on a Sunday afternoon for quite some time. Well, not Formula 1 cars on track right now, but cars that are set to provide some really good racing, I'm sure. Not the biggest of grids always in the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain, but the racing that we do get is usually pretty tight, actually. These cars that are based on the GT4 Cayman, they are obviously very evenly matched, being identical, and it's a very hotly policed championship to make sure that no one team are producing cars that are suspiciously quicker than anybody else. And it is a great breeding ground, in theory, for wannabe GT races. There are quite a few junior GT categories, but not that many that kind of cater for that kind of next step on the ladder. Not quite ready to jump straight into a GT4 championship, for example, but for drivers that want to try and, particularly in the pro class, prove that they're good enough to do so, well, coming and racing in this championship is certainly a good idea. And of course, the AM class, then, you have the gentleman racers that just enjoy racing and they want to race Porsches around the best tracks in the country, and they enjoy themselves immensely as they do, and we enjoy watching them. Getting ready for racing then, 25 minutes, round number 5 of the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. The red lights will go out momentarily and we'll be away and racing. That happens now. From pole position, looks like a decent start for Jack Bartholomew then, as he looks to try and hold the lead into turn number 1, but diving up the inside is, that's not Theo Edgerton. Edgerton goes to the outside, to the inside, and Ethan Hawkey goes to the outside, so Edgerton gets the lead, and Hawkey, I think, is going to snatch second place away from Bartholomew. So Jack was away well off the line, but then just didn't get into the first corner first, and, well, he's going to fend Hawkey off, but that is going to give a decent little lead now to the number 54 car of Theo Edgerton as they head through Maggots and Beckett's for the first time. Side by side there in the background for 4th position. That was pretty close, Clark and Armstrong together. And then in the AM category, it looks like it is still Ambrogio Perfetti there, 6th place overall, who is going to be leading in the AM class ahead of the championship leader, Ian Humphries. So Theo Edgerton, then the pro championship leader, gets himself, as he would say, into his rightful position at the front of the field. There go the AM cars. And actually, no, that's Alexei Malyakin, isn't it, that's got himself into the AM lead. Then he's started 3rd on the grid in the number 23 Into Racing Porsche. But there you can see he's ahead of the Chupa Chups car of Ambrogio Perfetti. And then a challenge there for 3rd place. Ian Humphries almost gets assaulted by, that's Nigel Rice, isn't it, going up the inside. He then repays the favour and allows his Beluga teammate, number 22, Carl Gavers, to take advantage. So that was pretty feisty racing there, but it worked out well for the Beluga squad. One of their drivers holding on to 3rd and the other one gaining 4th place. Grabby they go then. Lively racing here on the opening half a lap or so, particularly amongst these AM contenders as they head into Village. Defensive line there being taken by Cavers as he tries to hold on to his newly acquired position, but he leaves the door wide open then into the loop, and so back up the inside again goes Nigel Rice, side by side behind them as well. That's number 5, Pete Chambers, trying to get past Charles March, but unsuccessfully through Aintree. Right then, first lap about to be completed. The 5 pro drivers starting to make a bit of a break. We have had that change for the lead look in the AM category, so Malyakin's fallen back behind Perfetti. In qualifying, Malyakin was about 2/3 of a second slower than Perfetti, so you would expect Ambrogio to have the pace, and he's showing that now. He's got the lead back and he's starting to pull away. Malyakin's going to have his wing mirrors full very shortly of Ian Humphries, who he also jumped at the start. Humphries keen to try and get that place back again now. Into Copse Corner they go then. 1 lap completed. Edgerton leads. Bartholomew 2nd. Ethan Hawkey 3rd. 4th for Clark. 5th is Armstrong, and there Ambrogio Perfetti for Into Racing back into the AM class lead. It was almost side by side there for 2nd in class. Looked as though Malyakin and Humphries were getting themselves together, but Malyakin has held on. Turn through Beckett's corner again. Perfetti with the lead. 2 cars behind him, though, doing battle for 2nd place. There they are. Look, the black car is Alexei Malyakin, who has that 1 podium, like I said, at Brands Hatch last time out. It was a 2nd place finish in the first race at Brands Hatch. That's the position he's running again now within the AM category as he runs down the Hanger Straight cars really bobble around there under braking, don't they? Quite a bumpy braking zone into Stoke Corner. Of course, it's a heavy braking zone, and when we do have things like the British Grand Prix taking place here, those high downforce cars can actually ripple the surface of the tarmac, create these bumps into some of the bigger braking points, such as the downforce level on those cars. And of course, everyone else that comes at races here for the rest of the year have to then deal with that. There are a couple of places like that. Into Village is another one where it's quite bumpy under braking too, so easy to snatch a brake. These cars will have ABS, of course, but still quite easy to snatch that brake and lock up. Good run there through Abbey Corner for Ian Humphries, but good defensive move equally by Maliak in there, who gets to the inside through Village, forces Humphries the long way round, and they're being caught by Nigel Rice. Look, Nigel Rice, the white and black car just behind them, who is second to Humphries in the championship within the AM category. So that's going to be spurring Ian on even more to get this move made. Oh, Malikin very sideways in front of him through Aintree Corner, and then there's contact down the Wellington straight. That seemed unnecessary, but the Beluga driver is going to go through, and I reckon that Nigel Rice might be able to follow him through on the outside line as well here. Maliakin's been knocked off his rhythm. He tries to fight back though, and does get to the apex of Brooklands first, so hangs on to third in class, but that was very, very robust as they went through Aintree and down the Wellington straight. Maliakin just lost the rear of the car. I don't know if maybe there was a sprinkle of rain at that part of the circuit, but for some reason the rear of the car broke loose through what should be a fairly easily flat left-hander at Aintree. And as he gathered it together, Humphries did a good job not to run straight into him, took advantage, went to the inside, and then the two of them sort of met in the middle of the road down the Wellington straight. So potential drama there, but they avoided it for the most part, and it is Humphries back into second place, and now Nigel Rice has a car between himself and the man that he's fighting for the AM Championship lead. So the battle calms down for a second. Let's take a look back, shall we, at what's happened. So this was how it all started. So Ian Humphries, he has Maliakin on the ropes here. He's defended into Village, defends into the loop, and that means that there's almost a gap on the inside. They both go in on a tighter line than they should be, and just there, look, Maliakin gets sideways, Humphries gets alongside, and well, in fairness to Maliakin, he was holding his line there, wasn't he? And Humphries just started to creep across. We'll see it better here from the head-on shot. Yeah, there was definitely no need for Ian Humphries to move that far to the left, was there? But anyway, he was probably going to make the move stick regardless, but decided just to leave a little witness mark down the right-hand side of Alexei Maliakin's car, just to remind him of the great battle that they had. So, Humphries, second place. Meanwhile, Ambrosia Perfetti is racing here with the fifth-placed car overall. That's Matthew Armstrong, who is a pro driver. Ambrosia Perfetti really is the class of the AM field. 4 wins from 4... he is the class of the AM field this weekend. No wins yet, but he has had that podium, of course, and really does want to try and get this this number 51 car back into the championship fight, going the right way about it here, but unfortunately getting past Matthew Armstrong won't do him any good at all, because you only score points within your class. So for Ambrosia Perfetti, he's already on for the maximum points for winning the race. He also, I believe, comfortably has the fastest lap so far of the AM drivers, so he doesn't really need to get involved in this scrap. But to my point earlier on, the AM drivers, not necessarily career drivers, they're here just to have a bit of fun. And if they see someone ahead of them that they think they're quicker than, they're going to try and overtake them, whether they're a pro or an AM driver. And that's exactly what Perfetti is trying to do now. For 5th place overall, through Copse Corner they go. Matthew Armstrong isn't even that far off the pro pace, to be fair. His fastest lap is within half a second or so of the next fastest pro driver, which will be number 77, Charles Clark. The fastest lap of the race, incidentally, just set by Jack Bartholomew, who's starting to get into his rhythm now. 3/10 quicker that time than the race leader, Theo Edgerton. So the lead gap down to 1 second. We'll monitor that. They're not nose to tail yet, but you can see there they just disappear from view. They were getting closer together. It's a similar gap then between HAWKEY and Clark, 3rd and 4th, and then this fight for 5th. So they're pairing off a bit here in the top half of the field. On the 4th lap then in this 25-minute race, there is Theo Edgerton leading the way, as he's been very, very used to doing this year. He's never finished worse than 2nd this season. Only time he hasn't won, though, it was that man there that beat him, and that was in our most recent race, the 2nd race at Brands Hatch. And Jack Bartholomew did manage to get his first victory in the season, and he's closing in again here, isn't he, on this lap? He's another 2.5 tenths quicker in the first sector, fractionally slower in the second sector, and when I say fractionally, I mean less than a tenth. So In fact, only about 100th of a second, so they near enough matched each other in Sector 2. 4 sectors on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit because of its length, 3.6 miles or so. Now, through the middle sector here, it looks as though Edgerton's getting back away. So through the tight section at Village and Loop, it looks like maybe Edgerton's car is set up better. But perhaps through the high-speed stuff, that's where Bartholomew's car looks good. Third sector ends halfway down the Wellington Straight. It's actually a purple third sector there for Edgerton, and he does get 4 tenths, nearly 5 tenths back from Bartholomew in Sector 3. Oh, battling in the background going on, look, and there's been some changing here, hasn't there? That's Nigel Rice ahead of Maliakin, and he's brought with him Carl Cavers. So Maliakin losing 2 places. He is now down to 5th in the class. And that was a move made, you have to presume, through the Village Loop area. And now Cavers trying to attack and defend at the same time there, the 22 Beluga car. Carl Cavers yet to get a class podium. Well, he's running nicely now in 4th place in class with Nigel Rice right ahead of him. Can he get himself into the top 3 places in class? Look at the way that Ian Humphries has gapped this group, by the way, 5.25 seconds up the road now. He only got past them a lap and a half ago, so that's some serious pace there from Humphries. Is he quicker than Perfetti, though? That's the question. Yes, he is. 6 tenths quicker than Perfetti on the previous lap. Now, a big part of that, though, is Perfetti getting held up here by Matt Armstrong, because Perfetti's fastest lap is at 2:11.26, which is on a par with the pace that Ethan HAWKEY ran on his fastest lap. Ethan HAWKEY's fastest lap was also a 2:11.2. So Ambrogio Perfetti is essentially the 3rd or 4th fastest car on the track, but he's getting held up by Armstrong, and so all the while, Humphries is starting to close in. Although he was a couple of tenths slower in the first sector on that occasion. Then the fight for 3rd in class. Nigel Rice, the white car. The white, red and blue Beluga machine is Carl Cavers. And then Maliakin in the black car behind. There goes number 77, which is Charles Clark, who... yeah, he's always lapping quicker here by 10.5 at least on the previous lap than Ethan HAWKEY. This is the fight, though, isn't it? 3rd, 4th, 5th in the AM category, with actually March and Chambers not far back. So 5 cars here, all fighting for a podium spot in class. Goes to show, doesn't it? You don't need a 40-car grid to have a good race. It's always been competitive racing in this championship. Perfetti might finally have got the overlap here on Matthew Armstrong. Meanwhile, for 5th place overall, the AM class leader moves ahead of the 5th place man in the pro category, Matthew Armstrong. And that was nicely done. Good racecraft there. He forced Armstrong to defend a bit too much. He made a mistake, ran wide, and gave the place away. Black and white warning flag going out to number 27, Ian Humphries, for track limits, we assume. There were a couple of other drivers I noticed that were briefly being shown on the timing screen as being warned for that as well. It's so tempting, though, isn't it? It's become one of the big debates of motorsport in recent years. Tarmac runoff areas, yes, they are safer than gravel traps and grass and barriers, but it means you're not punished at all for running wide, and policing track limits can sometimes be an issue. We have different track limits rules, of course, in different countries. Also doesn't help the help matters, although we're running to the European rules, I believe, this weekend. So you are allowed 3 wheels over the white lines, but if all 4 wheels go over them, that's when you start getting warned and eventually penalised for exceeding the track limits. So as you can see at the top of the screen, we are approaching half-race distance now. 13.25 minutes of the 25 remain. Theo Edgerton with a 1.4 second lead over Jack Bartholomew in second. They're 4 seconds ahead of Ethan HAWKEY and Charles Clark, 3rd and 4th, who are only 6 tenths apart. Then it's Ambrogio Perfetti 5th. Matthew Armstrong, that is down to 6th, but still 5th in the pro class. Perfetti leading in AM. Ian Humphries is 2nd in AM. And into the pit lane, I'm afraid, goes Pete Chambers. Red Line Racing team with some work to do. There's clearly an issue with that car. That's a shame, because he was just becoming a part of that 3rd place battle in AM, wasn't he? Which is still held by Nigel Rice from Carl Cavers from Alexei Maliakin, and on the grass goes Charles March. That was a big, big lose, and you've got to be careful not to get buried in the gravel. Put your foot down, don't spin the wheels. No, it's gone, it's buried, and Charles March, I'm afraid, is out of the race in the Team Parker racing car. So Team Parker and Red Line both losing a car within a few seconds of each other there, and they were the 2 cars that were running at the back of the pack. He's a long way back from Maliakin, just misses his braking point, doesn't he? And then has to take to the grass to avoid rear-ending Maliakin, which was the right thing to do, because contact at that speed would have wrecked both cars. But unfortunately, he ends up just getting buried. Might have been better trying to find reverse gear there, because these cars, of course, are rear-wheel drive, so when he first kind of came to rest, the rear wheels were not in the gravel. If he'd have found reverse, he'd have had some traction. He might have been able to get going again, but he, in a rush to get back on the track, which is understandable, floored the throttle in first gear, spun the rear wheels up and got buried. So that's March out of the race. Chambers is still in the pit lane, so he looks like a retirement as well. So we're down 2, but still that good battle going on in the AM class between Rice, Cavers and Maliak in for third place. Bartholomew, fastest lap of the race, but only a 10.5 quicker than Edgerton. So Jack Bartholomew 1.25 seconds back. That's what 1.25 seconds looks like. And then look, that's what 5 seconds looks like. Back to HAWKEY third and Charles Clark in 4th position. Charles Clark, who has actually had 2 third-place finishes, but his season was unravelled a bit by a non-finish in the second race at Thruxton when they were sporting the British Touring Car Championship. This championship sort of floating between both the BTCC and British GT support packages, so they're racing on high-profile events with live coverage of every round, and that's one of the big selling points again of this championship too. But Charles Clark, despite those 2 third-place finishes, still 5th and last in the Pro Class Championship, although only 3 points behind Matthew Armstrong. He's going to get at least one of those points back in this race, and if he could find a way past Ethan HAWKEY, he could get another one. That's not going to be easy to do. These cars, as I said, very even in performance. I have to say Ethan HAWKEY's a little bit off the pace, though. Ethan, of course, raced with us last year as well. So second-year drive, you would have expected him maybe to be up there really fighting for race wins more regularly, and he has had those 2 second-place finishes to Edgerton and 2 third places as well, but you know, when you look at the distance now separating HAWKEY from the top 2, we've still got 10 minutes to go. We're only 15 minutes into this race. Now, that's not ideal, is it? Charles March's car is quite deeply buried in that gravel trap down at Club. There is a live snatch vehicle that could be dispatched to remove the car, but it's going to require at least double-waved yellows for a lap or so. Maybe, just maybe, the need for a safety car. Lead gap goes back out again that time. Wasn't such a good lap there for Jack Bartholomew. In fact, he was almost he was 9/10 of a second slower that time than he had been on the previous lap, the man in second place. So Theo Edgerton looking more and more comfortable now. 5-second track limits time penalty for car number 15, I'm afraid. Nigel Rice, so having worked hard for third place in the AM category, he's been given a 5-second penalty. And that's going to drop him a couple of places, isn't he? Because he's 1.2 seconds nearly ahead of Carl Cavers, who is 1.8 ahead of Alexei Maliakin. So that will drop Rice down to last place, essentially. So that's a shame for Nigel, who worked hard to get himself back into a class podium place, having started 4th in class, dropped to 5th at the start, got back up to 3rd, and now he's back to 5th again. A yo-yo race for him, but it's going to end, I'm afraid, on a downswing, unless, of course, he can gap the cars behind him in the next 8 3/4 minutes. Which he could do, because he's got some nice clean air ahead of him, and he is quicker, significantly quicker than Maliakin, and about 3/4 of a second or so on the previous lap, quicker than Cavers. Edgerton then, leading the way in the sectors on this lap. He's a 10th slower than Edgerton than Bartholomew in Sector 1. He is 2/10 slower in Sector 2, but it's this sector, isn't it, where Edgerton looks strong. The car, I noticed as it went through Maggots and Beckett's that time, looked very twitchy at high speed, but that will probably help it through the low-speed corners. If the car's a little bit pointier, it might rotate a bit better through the tighter corners. Always, when you're setting a car up, it's a compromise. You have to. It's very rare that you'll have a car that is exceptional through the high-speed corners and exceptional at low speed as well. You kind of have to take a look at the track, work out where you're strong, where it's important to have the speed, set your car up around that, really. Back to the 5th place battle then, and Reggio Perfetti had been getting away from Matthew Armstrong, but no more. And look in the background, Ian Humphries is now only 2.6 seconds behind this pair, and Armstrong is up the inside of Brooklyn. That is an absolutely lovely move, and sensibly there, Perfetti didn't fight it. I think it was all he could do there to avoid contact, honestly, because it was a very late move, a fair move for Armstrong, but a late one. And so Perfetti now finds himself back in that familiar position, staring at the back of the number 9 Team Parker Racing car. And he's going to be forced into having another go here, isn't he? He's flicked the indicator on in his excitement there. I don't think that was going to work, Ambrogio, but yeah, worth a try, I suppose. Gets a good exit there from Copse Corner, but on that particular lap, Ian Humphries was nearly 2 seconds quicker than these two. There is the Beluga driver look. And of course, as Perfetti now starts to apply the pressure again to Armstrong, and Armstrong starts to defend, it's going to hold them up even more. So Ambrogio Perfetti's chances of winning his first AM race of the year are now hinging, really, on how quickly he can get back ahead of Matthew Armstrong. Or is it perhaps better to sit behind Armstrong, not challenge him, and just sort of follow him home, because they are, I remind you, in different classes, these two. So even if Perfetti gets ahead of Armstrong, it makes no difference to his championship points haul. Oh, mistake there for Humphries. Look in the background, he ran very wide at Stowe, so it's going to lose him a bit of time. Perfetti again applying the pressure. Definitely not choosing to sit behind and work with Matthew Armstrong. There's Humphries. So Humphries in the first sector was just under a tenth quicker than Perfetti, but I think he'll be slower through sector 2, which ends there. Yeah, he was a couple of tenths slower just by running wide at Stowe, so a net loss of a tenth or so on this lap for Humphries, who, of course, with less than 6 minutes to go, is probably getting a bit excitable now because he can see the leader, and he can see the leader is getting held up, although Perfetti's dropped back, hasn't he, from Armstrong now? I wonder if that's a conscious decision, just to tell Armstrong, look, I'm not going to have a go at you, you don't need to defend, just you do you mind your own business, and we can both come home with a safe and sensible finish. And for Perfetti, it would be a class win. Third sector times then, he's of course going to have lost a bit of time in that third sector, isn't he, from dropping back for whatever reason, at 40.5 for Perfetti, at 40.0 for Humphries, and that's actually a personal best third sector for Humphries, so making up for the little mistake at Stowe Corner. Can he get there in time? The gap at the start of the lap between Ambrogio Perfetti and Ian Humphries, first and second in the AM category, was 2.1 seconds. There you can see the Armstrong to Perfetti gap, of course, so yeah, Perfetti had that slow lap, partly because he was battling with Armstrong, really, on the previous lap. So Perfetti to Humphries is the one we're monitoring, comes down by half a second, so it's 1.6 now, nearly 1.7, really, between Perfetti and Humphries, with 4 3/4 minutes to go. Lap times of 2 minutes 11, so they should get 2 more, shouldn't they? 3 more potentially, because the leader is down at Stowe Corner. So Edgerton edging away from Bartholomew again. 2 seconds now the margin. Took half a second out of Jack on the previous lap. I think Bartholomew's going to have to settle for second. HAWKEY to Clark is back up to 1.4 now as well. So really, the last remaining piece of the puzzle to fit into place is this AM battle. Is Ian Humphries going to be able to catch Ambrogio Perfetti? First sector, the answer is no, because he's a tenth slower than the class leader now. Perfetti's dropped away from Armstrong. They're not tripping over each other as much, so they're going quicker. That's not good news for this man, because Ian Humphries wants to try and keep this 100% winning record up in the AM category. Won all 4 races so far. Perfetti has had only the 1 podium, though, so Ambrogio is 33 points behind Humphries in the championship. Humphries leads the points, Perfetti is 8th, so it doesn't matter too much for Ian. He's beating people like Nigel Rice and obviously Pete Chambers, who is back in the race, by the way. Pete Chambers, he lost, I think, just the 1 lap. Yeah, he's about to go a second lap down, I think, to the race leader. Overall race leader, that is, but he should still score points. So Pete Chambers significantly getting back into the race, but of course Charles March, as we saw, embedded in the gravel trap at Club, is going to be, hopefully, our only retirement. So Humphries, second sector 2/10 slower, third sector 2/10 slower. He's losing time again now to Perfetti. Perfetti just needs to manage this, but we've seen Ambrogio Perfetti lose race victories on the final lap before, when it looked like he had it all settled and secure. He's mysteriously had a moment somewhere on the last lap, so he just needs to keep keep a level head here. We've got 2 more laps to go. Don't push, don't get him embroiled in this battle with Armstrong, and you should be fine. Oh, and don't pick up a 5-second penalty like Theo Edgerton's just done. The race leader has picked up a 5-second track limits penalty. There's the confirmation on the screen, and Theo Edgerton is going to lose the race victory because of track limits. He's 2.4 seconds ahead of Bartholomew. He's going to lose 5 seconds because of the penalty, and he's only got a lap and a half left. Surely he's not going to be able to get that gap back over 5 seconds. They've just lapped Pete Chambers, by the way, for a second time, but that is serious drama Well, that is just one example of how you can throw a comfortable race victory away right at the death, because there was no way Edgerton was going to get caught by Bartholomew here. Bartholomew, on the last 2 or 3 laps, has been the best part of half a second a lap slower. And Edgerton, unfortunately, has thrown it all away. And now Ambrogio Perfetti's doing his best to do the same, look, because he's caught Matthew Armstrong again. Every time he does this, he immediately starts losing time to Humphries behind him. Because in the first sector, Humphries did a personal best, so he was a 10th quicker. The second sector, he matches to the 1,000th of a second, actually, Perfetti. But now Ambrogio's getting held up again through the quick right-hander at Abbey, the quick left at Farm, onto the brakes into Village. Armstrong defends the inside, Perfetti to the outside. He needs to make this move, really, because he's going to keep on hemorrhaging time to Humphries behind. 77, by the way. Charles Clark has been warned for track limits, so he just needs to survive another lap without exceeding them again, and he should be fine. But it's just so easy to do. These tyres, remember, have had a real workout over the best part of 25 minutes of racing, so you have less grip now. You're tired. You're just trying to get the thing home. It's just so easy to lose concentration and just run a bit too wide, out of Copse, out of Stowe, out of Club, out of this corner, Luffield as well. Look at that. Sideways again for Perfetti. In the third sector, he was 2/10 slower than Humphries. This gap is going to be getting down towards about 1.5 seconds now, I reckon, at the end of the lap. We go on to the final lap of the race then. Ambrogio Perfetti has a lead of, well, 1.8 seconds over Ian Humphries. But look, he's latched right back onto the rear bumper now of Matthew Armstrong ahead for 5th place overall. Out of Stowe towards Maggotts and Beckett's. There are the leaders. The lead gap is 2.8 seconds. That is not enough for Theo Edgerton. It looks like he's going to lose this victory because of a 5-second track limits penalty, unless something dramatic happens to Bartholomew on the last lap, and Perfetti is sideways again as they go into Chapel. He doesn't need to be pushing this hard. I know I sound like a stick in the mud when I say that, but he's got the class victory, his first of the year, sewn up here, as long as he doesn't do anything silly in trying to get past Matthew Armstrong. Race leaders overall go through Club Corner then. Chap Bartholomew, 2.8 seconds back at the start of the lap. He was actually quicker than Edgerton in the first sector. So it looks like Bartholomew's going to inherit his second win on the bounce. And Bartholomew, as I said, was 20 points behind Edgerton. Now, he's only going to get a couple of points back from him here. That's the trouble with the championship. There's not a big points difference between each position on track. So it can be difficult to overhaul a big championship deficit, but this is the right way to go about it. He might not have been as quick as Edgerton on the day, but he kept it within the track limits, and that ultimately looks like it's going to win him a race. Neat and tidy there, out of Aintree, down the Wellington straight they go again, and Theo Edgerton, in his mind, is going to be a race winner, but the record books will tell you that Jack Bartholomew will win round number 5 of the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain for 2021. Out of Luffield Corner comes Theo Edgerton, a rather frustrated Theo Edgerton, you'd have to imagine. A track limits penalty means that it is a win on the road for Edgerton, but a win, as far as the championship is concerned, for Jack Bartholomew in second place on the road. Jack Bartholomew then should inherit the victory, and he does now as the timing screen updates itself. Ethan Hawkey will be third ahead of Clark, and then this is Matthew Armstrong with Ambrogio Perfetti right behind him. Perfetti has kept it on the island. He's not been caught by Ian Humphries. He just needs to get to the line now without throwing this one away, and he is going to manage to do it. He doesn't get 5th place overall, but he does win in the AM category. Ambrogio Perfetti, and you know what, I think he enjoyed that race. Flashes the light, his indicators back on again as well, but he doesn't care. He's won the race in the AM category, his first victory of the season, and Ian Humphries comes within, in the end, 0.9 of a second, yes, of keeping his 100% win record going, and actually set a personal best lap on the last lap of the race there, did Humphries, a 2:12.165. Very impressive on what was the 12th lap of the race. Jack Bartholomew, though, is a repeat winner now in the championship, in the pro category, his second win on the trot. He'll be wishing now, won't he, that he didn't have that non-finish at Brands Hatch, because a 0 points haul there is what's really done the damage in the championship. Long way to go, though, still, of course. He could get back into it. Bartholomew then wins after a 5-second track limits penalty for Theo Edgerton, who ends up second. Ethan Hawkey had a quiet race to third ahead of Charles Clark. And Matthew Armstrong, who had one of the best battles in the race with the AM winner, Ambrogio Perfetti, who comes home in 6th. Ian Humphries' win record is broken. He was second in the class ahead of Nigel Rice, Carl Cavers, Alexei Malyakin, who was very exciting to watch in that race. Pete Chambers was 2 laps down after a pit stop, and Charles March, unfortunately, a non-finisher after spinning into the club gravel trap. So, entertaining stuff, as always, from the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. Their second and final race of the weekend, the 6th round of the championship, will be our last race of the day here at Silverstone at 10 to 5 this afternoon. So tune in again then for the second race. The RDC Clubhouse looking as fine as ever, even if the weather isn't exactly very summery here at Silverstone. The RDC welcoming a few of their members here this weekend to enjoy the racing. Spectators back at the racetrack as well, paying spectators out in the grandstands and the roving spectator areas have enjoyed some really good racing this morning, actually, and they've got plenty more to come, including that 3-hour British GT race in a little while. Highlights, though, of the Porsche Championship, and it was a very, very lively start. From pole position, in the end, it was not Jack Bartholomew that led at Copse in his attempts to defend from Theo Edgerton. Unsuccessfully, he almost lost second to Ethan HAWKEY as well. HAWKEY, though, would eventually settle into third place. Alexei Maliakin was dicing away with Ian Humphries for second in the AM category. He got sideways at Aintree, and then there was a little bit of unnecessary contact down the Wellington straight, but Humphries went through ahead of Maliakin and then tried to find a way past Nigel Rice in front of him. Up the road, the AM category was being led by Ambrogio Perfetti, though, who got himself ahead of Matthew Armstrong briefly into 5th overall. Armstrong, a pro driver, whilst Pete Chambers retired to the pit lane with mechanical issues. He did rejoin, though, actually. It wasn't a retirement, but Charles March was a retirement after he spun and then buried himself in the club gravel trap. He unfortunately was out of the race. Armstrong came back at Ambrogio Perfetti with a really nice move at Brooklands, but this continued to lose the pair time, and Perfetti's AM rival, Ian Humphries, was closing in rapidly behind. The battle raged on and on and on, and Perfetti, try as he might, never could get back into that 5th place, but it didn't matter. The AM class victory was still his. He had a real lunge there at the loop on what I think was the final lap, but to no avail. Theo Edgerton won the race on the road, but on the very last lap was given a 5-second track limits penalty, meaning it was Theo Edgerton that inherited the pro and overall race victory. Behind them, Ethan HAWKEY was 3rd, Charles Clark was 4th, Armstrong came home in 5th with Ambrogio Perfetti claiming the AM class victory. So great racing then here from Silverstone as ever in the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. Their second race will be up a bit later on this afternoon.